What's up, Coderati? I hope you guys are keeping it cooler than I am down here in the surface of the sun. I mean, geez, it's pretty damn hot this summer in Florida. Even the Gators are a little lazy. They're less aggressive because they're just, I guess they don't sweat. I guess I can't say they're sweating their tail off. Do they sweat? I don't know. Somebody write in the show or hit the Discord up. I don't know if reptiles sweat. Anyway, I have a great show for you today. My old friend Jay LaCroix of Learn Linux TV, he is, to my mind, one of the top Linux gurus around. I know we've been having lots of Tux-related chat in the Discord. You know, I'm doing my series on DominicM.com about moving over to the framework with the DHH's Omacub, which I still don't know how to pronounce. And yeah, a lot of Linux conversations happening. Jay has... I don't even know how many videos he's made. It's got to be maybe 1,000 at this point. I know that just his Crash Course series, which is like his intro series, has 80-something videos in it, and counting, because he's always adding them. And that's just one playlist, one series. So this is a pretty good one. We do talk a little bit about his retro gaming hobby as well. So if you're into that, you got some of the gamer radio goodness in here too. And yeah, I had a lot of fun with this. A couple pieces of housekeeping. I'm going to open up in the Discord the show feedback channel. I think from when you hear this in 2 weeks, we're going to do a mail grab episode. If you did write in and are wondering why you didn't get a reply, that is why. So I'm just, doing them periodically as one quick episode, like towards the end of the month or the beginning of a new month. Do go hang out in the Discord. A lot of people posting jobs in there. I know folks have been affected by layoffs. Get in the hiring channel. We've got jobs in Europe being posted. We've got jobs here in the States being posted. Some are remote, some are not, but just keep keep an eye out. And many of the jobs being posted, by the way, are being posted by the actual technical hiring managers. So it's not like weird recruiters posting stuff where you're going to have to go through, 15 recruiter interviews and then maybe or maybe not get the job. These are the actual principals. I would wager that if they're taking the time to hang out in a Coder Radio Discord, they are fairly engaged. They're not, like Dilbert style managers. So that's pretty good. Most of them are actively developers or practitioners of whatever IT voodoo they're doing themselves. So again, probably something to look at, even if you didn't get laid off, right? If you're just looking to make a move, doesn't hurt just to join the channel. Just as even if you lurk, turn your notifications off in that room, and you just look in and out. A lot of stuff going on. I am possibly going to be looking for a little bit of graphical help for some merch. I am working on the new merch. Unfortunately, shipping to Europe has become a hassle. So the vendor I wanted to use, it seems like I'm either going to have 2 vendors, which I don't want to do for logistical. And obviously I want to, for pricing reasons, I want one vendor that I can buy a lot from and get a discount. So I'm kind of starting from square one. So if you happen to know someone who does, some company that does shipping both to the US and Europe of those kind of like swag things, obviously t-shirts, but I'm thinking, I don't know, I have a couple of crazy ideas, but we'll start probably smaller than I was going for with like a t-shirt and maybe like a coffee cup or something like that. Just to get that running again. Let me know. I am actively looking. I know I promised I'd get it out for the summer. It just, the world is a little unstable. So didn't happen, but hopefully by Thanksgiving. All right. So I'm not going to bore you anymore. Here is Jay LaCroix. And also always remember, this is brought to you by Alice.dev and my company, The Mad Botter. If you need dev work done, let me know. Bye-bye. Here's Jay. This episode is sponsored by Mailtrap, an email platform that developers love. Go for high inboxing rates. Try today at mailtrap.io. Check the details in the description below. Well, it's getting awfully open source in here. Hello, Jay. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good, of course. As promised, this is Jay LaCroix from Learn Linux TV, the Linux education and I don't know, a kind of guru channel that is just taken way off.
Yeah, it's like Linux education and Linux shenanigans, basically.
I like that shenanigan. So you can tell me a little bit about yourself and Learn Linux TV.
All right. So I consider myself a technologist. I've always had this love of technology, pretty much since I was a kid. So for me, I kind of always knew it's something that I wanted to get into. I discovered Linux in 2002. I was, just in college at the time, taking some classes. And when a teacher walked into my Unix class one day and said, "Hey, we're going to be doing a pilot Linux class for the very first time. If anyone's interested, sign up." And of course I did. I was the only one in that Unix class, surprisingly, that got up and signed up for that class. But it was a full class. But when I discovered it, or when the class was offered, I got the textbook for the course like probably 2 months ahead of time. I already read it cover to cover 3 times before the class started. I just,
Nice.
for some reason, sometimes something connects with you and you don't really know why. It's just like, I like this thing. And sometimes you don't know why that is. But for me, it was like, this is great. And at the time, it was very, very hard. It was like in a time period where installing an NVIDIA driver could brick your entire Linux install and you'd have to reinstall from scratch. And, trying to get on the internet, you had like 10 different commands and things you had to set up because, TCP IP wasn't even set up for you automatically. So it was anything but user friendly. But for some reason, and I just really loved the challenge of it. And at the time, I was running Windows XP because pretty much everyone was running Windows XP at that time. And then one day, yeah, I was really poor at the time, so I didn't really have an internet connection always, depending on my financial situation. So one day, I'm reinstalling Windows for just to get some extra performance out of my computer. I did that a lot. I went over the activation limit, and then I had to walk to a payphone in the freezing rain and transpose numbers with a Sharpie to get the activation code, and then walked all the way home and asked myself, why am I asking permission to use the computer that I bought? It was a legally purchased Windows license, so fair is fair, but it was just frustrating. And I think at that point, I was already dabbling with Linux, and I'm like, I'm just going to make it my only operating system right then and there. And it was obviously that was a few years later, because I just wanted that freedom and I was already pretty much obsessed with it anyway. It's kind of like baptism by fire when something isn't really ready for the general user yet because it wasn't. But I still kind of trucked along. And then later on, I'm also a retro gamer. This is kind of like one of my hobbies. I love the classic video games. So one day I decided to create a retro gaming console back when
Nice.
RetroPie didn't exist yet. It was just this old Dell PC. I installed Mythbuntu on it, custom coded the XML menus because I'm, just totally specific about things. And then I'm like, I got to show somebody about this. I got to like tell people about it because, I was really proud of it. So I pointed a point and shoot camera at my TV in the bedroom and just made this YouTube video about it. And then people were like, "How'd you do it?" I'm like, "Oh, okay. You want to know how I did it? Yeah, I could make a video about that." And the video, and then after that, I saw that people were interested in this, and I also saw that tutorials online were a thing. So I figured maybe I could just give this a shot. So I went to the flea market. I bought a D630 laptop and then a $15 microphone from Walmart. It was horrible quality back then. And I just kind of went with it. And, years later, I'm where I'm at now. Now, meanwhile, I was working my way up in IT. I started as help desk and then went into Windows system administration, then transferred into Linux system administration. And then I managed a team and then became director of operations for the company that I was working for, which ended up being an amazing company that I really loved working for them. And then one day at this point, the YouTube channel has already existed as kind of like a side hobby for some time. And then they have a meeting with us and they say, we're going to be hiring a bunch more people. We have a lot more contracts, a lot more business, which is not a bad call. I mean, usually when you get called into a company wide meeting, you're thinking, oh my God, are we laying people off?
I was
And
to
it
say, is
was
the axe going to come down? Yeah.
exactly. But it
Yeah.
was it was the opposite. It was something that everybody was happy to hear. They had job security, everything's fine. But when they said, we're going to be working a lot harder, I'm like, I don't think I can do work. I could, push the channel and do my day job if the day job getting more, busier. So I resigned. And that was back in 2021. And then the channel became my only focus. So I'd like to apply the things that I've learned and teach people, because one of the big driving factors was that education just drove me nuts. It was like, and I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. You read a programming book And in one of the chapters, you're creating a mortgage calculator. And I'm thinking, who is excited to develop a
Yep.
mortgage calculator? You know what I'm saying? And then they talk about functions and programming. And of course, they're going to equate it to breeds of dog, class dog, and poodle is a member of class dog.
Oh
And,
my God. Yes. A dog is
those,
a type of mammal. Yeah.
yeah, I figured you know exactly what I'm talking
I've
about.
seen that in
So,
so many books.
in so many, and it was just so boring. And then at the same time, I'm in college again, and I'm just looking at the program, and I realized, really early on that we get kind of like the short end of the stick in IT and education. And I don't want to say all colleges are bad, by no means, but the ones that, I check through their program, they don't teach people some of the things that they will be using on the job. Even in software engineering, there's not a single class on version control. And I'm thinking, seriously, like that's the thing, that's one of the things that they expect you to know on your very first day of a job working as a software engineer. You have to know at least Git, or
Yeah.
back then SVN was an option. You had to know one or the other. But here we are in a situation where people are going to get into the job and not really know everything that they're going to do. And then when it comes to Linux specifically, some of the instruction was okay, but it's people need to know this stuff as it's actually used. They need to see what you'll be doing. Like, how do you do a lift and shift, like transfer information from one server to another? How do you install Fedora or install Ubuntu? And these types of things just weren't very covered. They weren't covered well. And I figured what I could do, take my obsession and teach in my little corner of the universe. At least I can. I mean, wasn't interested in teaching IT in general, because YouTube kind of wants you to be laser focused anyway. So I'm like, I love Linux, so it's fun. It doesn't feel like work. I'm fascinated by it, and I'll just start creating content. And over the years, it's been a very slow growth. I mean, I remember when I got $70 from a ad revenue, I'm like, yay, I'm going to buy a PS3 game. That's going to be my treat tonight. And that was kind of how it was for the longest time. And then in 2018, I felt like I'm sitting on a gold mine, so to speak. Like, this could be big. If I don't do something with this, then, I'll lose the opportunity. So I started to really push it. And then, several years later, it became my only thing. And at that point, I was able to put a lot more time and attention to detail into the quality, and eventually make more money. I could afford a better microphone, get a better camera, eventually build a recording PC that's dedicated to the job, being an appliance. And then from there, just watching the growth has been incredible. I probably thought I would have peaked at like 500,000 or something. But when I started, Linux was nowhere near as popular as it was today. When I started, you look at IT jobs, out of every 20 you might find one Linux job. It's mostly going to be Windows admin and
Right.
help desk and things. And then but the lack of popularity didn't bother me. I just figured, this is what I want to do, whether it's popular or not. This is what makes me happy. And it just so happened that years later, Linux got more and more and more popular, took over the server market. And then the audience got bigger because the subject matter became more popular. And that really helped me, get the platform going. But just out of incredible work that it's been, but it never felt mundane. And like we mentioned before we recorded, audio is the only part of the job that I don't like, because that's just something that I've never been able to really wrap my head around. But over time, incrementally, it just got better and better. I made this small change, that small change. And it went from, I don't know, like maybe a couple hundred megabytes of a video. That's how much space it took. And my most recent upload, the folder was 400 gigabytes. I mean, it's just
Wow.
incredible how much bigger the project folder is than the actual video, which ended up being 8 gigabytes, but which is probably my average size. And all that from a time period back when it used to be a couple hundred megabytes, and just kind of scales. And it's just been amazing to watch something that started in my basement grow to become its own thing that people find value in. And the focus has always been to take these complicated subjects that are really hard to learn. For some people, learning Linux is like taking a
Yep.
calculus class. It's like, oh my God, I don't know if I can get through all that. But if someone breaks it down the right way and shows you how it's actually used in the real world, then you'll be in the real world doing it the same way other people that have been doing it are already doing it. And that's been my focus, is to try to I mean, to be fair, yeah, I was very boring when I first started, and the personality kind of came through more later. But the focus has always been to at least try to make it entertaining, like just do something weird, like a video about the cat command, and then feature real cats or something, just to keep people engaged. Like, why did he do that? Well, it keeps their attention. So it's just been a very wild ride to see it grow from nothing to something that people all over the world find value in.
Yeah, well, and you have, I think, having watched some of your videos and kind of before we got on here, going through the catalog, I think you have a good almost progression, right? You have the Linux crash course,
Yep.
you have a bunch of videos on like basic Linux commands, which I'm a little ashamed to say I've watched the one on sort multiple times
Hmm.
because I can't seem to remember syntax ever.
I consult my own books sometimes
Yeah,
when I forget something, because and that's one of the tips I give people when you first start out with this. It's pretty much like with everything else. You think people get this impression that they need to learn everything. No, it's like you buy a book, and it's like 600 pages long, and you spent your hard earned money on this book. So you get the impression I need to learn everything in this book to get my money's worth. But the truth of the matter is you're not going to learn, or I mean use everything that you learn, because your own use case is yours. You might not have a use for the sort command until you do, or the sed command or awk or any of these others. And sometimes you get this impression you have to learn everything, but it's pretty much impossible to learn everything. And I think when people realize that, it starts to be more approachable. You learn the things that you intend on doing at the moment and just focus on that. If you want to install Linux, just focus on that. Don't try to learn the science behind it if you
right.
haven't installed it yet, right? You got to at least get it installed. So just focus on that. And then use your books as resource material when you want to look up something, rather than trying to memorize every word. I mean, yeah, unless you're doing a certification program, I mean, sure, you have to learn, or at least have a decent understanding and memorization there. But when it comes to your actual day to day, you're just learning the things that matter to you. And I think that makes it more approachable. And similarly, when it comes to video editing, it's the same thing. When you bring up a video editor for the first time, you see like 200 buttons and knobs and dials, and you're like, is this NASA command, or is this a video editor? Like,
Oh
am I
yeah.
supposed to learn all this? And even I had to learn, no, you just learn the individual functions of the editor that pertain to the video that you're trying to make. And I ignore 90% of the features, just like some things within Linux are things that I don't even use. Like, I only started using the sed command within the last 2 years, surprisingly. So, but people see the content, and they kind of think of me as someone that has everything memorized. And what they don't realize is I'm just like everyone else. I have a notes file that is super thick of all the commands I don't use on a regular basis. So I could go and look up information when I need it. And like I mentioned, I consult my own books when I forget how to do something. And even worse, I've completely forgotten some things and Google it. And then, oh, I did a video on that. Oh, okay.
I've had that happen to me with some Docker stuff for Rails. I'm like, I forgot how to set this up. I knew there was like a script. I'm like, oh,
Yep.
this guy's just is really good on it. Like, oh shit, that's my GitHub account. Yeah.
Exactly. And one of the examples I'll give is LVM, which I use on everything. Logical Volume Manager, I think it's a good default to have. You could, for those that don't know, it gives you the ability to expand your file system and grow it if you increase the storage size. But it's not like I'm going to be resizing LVM volumes every day, unless I'm working in hosting like some people do, and they're dealing with, hundreds of clients. Are doing that all the time. But I might resize the volume 2 or 3 times a year. So it's one of those things where it's not going to be committed to memory if it's not something that you use regularly.
Well, and
So
you don't
you
need it
take
in
note.
memory, right? You just need
Yeah,
to, you use it when you use it, kind of thing.
exactly. Exactly. And I think getting back to the content of the channel, it's trying to approach it in a way that follows a narrative. Obviously, when you're watching Netflix, narrative is important. You have characters, you have a story. It has to be a good story, or else you're going to stop watching it. And a story or a narrative is not as important in tutorial content, but it kind of is, because the story is true. You're taking people where they are right now, and you're trying to map a narrative that's going to get them where they need to go. The narrative in my case is, why would you use this command? Why would you use this technology? What value is it going to add to you? And how do you build it, the steps to a point where they're going to get something that makes sense. And one of the ways I've done that is having people build something that they'll actually use. Like, it's one thing to just teach somebody how to install Debian as a server and then go through the commands, but how about turning your Debian server into a Nextcloud server, something that
Nice.
you can actually use and take value in? Maybe someone wants to set up a WordPress site. So how do you set up a WordPress site? And then naturally security comes into mind. You gotta, especially with WordPress, everybody is trying to attack that these days. So you arrive at these natural things, but there's a lot of writing involved, pages upon pages of, typing out the commands and finding the best path. And then that way, when someone gets the content, it's clear, this is for a beginner, this is for intermediate, this will get you from beginner to intermediate, whatever it happens to be. And it's also just trying to figure out what people want to learn and making the content that people actually want to learn from.
So let's take that kind of learning track a little bit. I imagine, I know from the audience here at Coder, we have a lot of developers who are, either working on company issued MacBooks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or they're working on Windows. But it seems from my very non-scientific survey of the Discord that most of the developers that listen to the show are web developers. And
Yeah, there'd be a lot of them, especially Node.js would be a big one.
there's tons of Node. We got a bunch of Python guys, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Just like it's like a snake den here. I don't understand what's going on.
Like Flask and things like that. Oh yeah, I love
Flask, a little
Python.
bit of fast API, a lot of Django though. Django seems to be
Yeah.
top of the heap for the snakes. A thing that I've been pitching, and I think sincerely, because it's why I just picked up a framework. I'm slowly transitioning out of Mac. Is your end deployment target, right? Your production environment.
Mm-hmm.
If you are a web developer, I guess the exception would be is if you're like a .NET web developer, but even then you can do it on Linux, is going to be something that looks a hell of a lot like a Debian or a Red Hat or an Ubuntu box. So
Yeah.
why not make your development environment mirror as closely that environment?
Well, I think that's really important, especially when you get into CI/CD, and then you have testing
Right.
environments. Like, you're going to have your production site, you're going to have your development site where you do all your experiments on. My opinion is to be all in. Now, sometimes, well, I shouldn't say just sometimes. You have a lot of times where it's like policy by numbers in some organizations. Like they just issue Windows. That's what everyone does. That's what they'll do, and they have this mandated software stack, and that makes it a lot harder. And then, but when you have, gosh, I'm forgetting the name of it now. It's not Windows Services for Unix, but it's their new Windows shell or Linux shell within
WSL.
That's it. That's it. Yep. Gosh, I can't believe I couldn't remember the name of that. When you have things like that, it can kind of help you navigate a scenario where you must use Windows. But my opinion is that if you can be all in on the platform that you're developing, I think that makes you a better developer, because you're going to learn things that go above and beyond. As a developer, you'll learn the things that are required to do your job, and you're going to probably learn those things well. Or you'll go above and beyond and learn even more. For one example of this I've seen is some developers understand TCP/IP very well because they like to know the progression of data and how things are sent. Other developers, they're not aware of what a VLAN is or a subnet is, but they know their code very well. But the ones that go above and beyond, I think, are the people that use it full time if they can. But then again, we get into company policy as far as whether or not that's something that you can do. But I think if you can be all in on the platform you're developing for, that makes a lot more sense, because you'll be more intimately involved with that platform and understand it better than most.
It makes a ton of sense, especially at least from my usage, right? Like a couple weird things started happening when Apple decided to change. This is way inside baseball, but they basically changed how like the Unix tools work on Mac,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
which for a brief period really broke Rails development.
Yeah, it does. It is.
Yeah,
A lot of people will say that Mac OS is almost like a successful Linux distribution, because you have, I mean, now it's ZSH, but you've had Bash behind the scenes, and you've had the same commands, and in a lot of ways that's still true, but it's also not quite the same thing. It's just like Active Directory is LDAP, but plus a bunch of Microsoft things added on that aren't in normal LDAP. So with Mac OS, it's like you have Unix, but plus some other changes. In some ways, it can be easy to work around if you try to be clever. For example, you could have a Debian container that you
Yep.
connect to, and then even though you're using a Mac, you're in the Debian container doing all of your stuff, and that just for some Mac users, that becomes your shell. You then forego the built-in Mac OS tools and you're just connecting to a VM, a Raspberry Pi, a container, or something like that. So you get the full experience. Anytime I've used Mac, I've always just went straight to a Linux server because,
Nice.
I run into the same things. And, I like anytime I've used Mac, I didn't even install Brew because I'm like, what's the point? I'm just going to connect to a Linux server anyway and just use that. So within each person's experience determines just how they can get involved with how deeply, but they can get involved. But when it comes down to thinking outside the box, I mean, you could always set up a Linux rig. Just you can get a computer on eBay for $200 or $300 that'll run
Oh
Linux
yeah.
well, and then you could just use that for even in your spare time if you're learning, and then take that knowledge back to work with you the next day, which is also why Home Lab is so popular because Home Lab gives you full control. You don't have any policy. There's nobody telling you what operating system you use. There's nobody telling you what laptop to buy. You just buy the components and use the distributions that resonate with you personally. And you get all the control and you get to scratch that itch. And then you take that information with you to work. One example in my case, early on in my career, being Ansible, someone at work was like, should we use that? Everyone's using that. What do you think? I'm like, I've been using that in my home lab for years. What do you want to know? And it kind of does make things better. But and some people will even go as far as to, for example, if they're developing for RHEL, they're going to maybe use Fedora on their
Yeah.
workstation, which isn't necessarily a one-to-one exact clone, but it's going to be something like 90% similar or somewhere around there. So they stay within that realm, or they're using Alma Linux or something. And I think that really helps people just understand the world. Because I think even if you're not a network engineer and you're a software engineer, I think understanding the basics of how packets flow and how things connect to each other will just help you troubleshoot your code faster. Is it your code that's the problem, or is it hitting something in your network that's preventing the message from going all the way through? And then that kind of helps troubleshooting to know all the players that are involved in this, and then you can navigate when it's your problem or someone else's problem.
It's so funny you say that because I often work either helping out or work ones that have worked for me, junior developers, and we tend to be working in higher level languages, right? A lot of Python, a lot of Ruby,
Mm-hmm.
and then they'll get a crash, right? And you get a stack trace that's basically a C or C++ crash.
I know it's so
And they're like,
hard
what the
to
hell is
read.
this? I said, well, so that beautiful language you're working in that doesn't make you care about things like memory really, or,
Yeah,
pointers. Yeah, it's a lie. All it's
yeah,
doing is calling into a vast library of C code. I know
yeah,
there's people in the chat who are going to email. I am aware that that's an oversimplification, but
yeah. It's
for
like,
the
what's a null
purposes,
pointer exception? I've never heard of that. What is that? That's
right?
one that
What's a
comes up a
pointer?
lot.
You got to go
Yeah.
all the way back.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And why should you avoid using them if you really want to get off into the weeds? But
But
that's another.
what is it? Reference by value versus reference, whatever, right? Like heap versus stack. We could do this all day. And
I know. Yeah. And Linux isn't really any better because, you learn very early on that, you need to look at the logs when there's a problem. But what log file do you look in? And it's even worse now because
oh yeah,
you have text file logs and you have binary logs with systemd, and then you have some developers that really are oppositional towards systemd, so they're going to continue to write text logs. So you're going to be dealing with two different types of log files that you have to use different commands to go through. And then once you find the information, it's like, oh, what exactly does this mean? There's like 20 different lines, and it's complaining about something in memory, but I'm not really sure what it is. And that could be, very challenging too. I mean, nowadays we can paste some of these error messages into AI and get some hints as far as what it
true.
might be. But when I started, it was just Google, just continue to hack at it and get, drop a few F bombs because you're really frustrated. And eventually you have this Dr. House style epiphany at the end where you figure out what the root cause is, and then you feel good about yourself. And it makes imposter syndrome in people a real thing, because it's, they have this job and they see these things and they're like, well, I've never seen that before. How do I troubleshoot that? Similar to getting those programming messages that are not going to be conducive to the Python code that you're writing, which is, very simple compared to some of the feedback that you get from it. And I think those should be seen as growing pains. I mean, you're going to hit those things, and I don't care how much you know or how good you are. You've hit those things. You've been frustrated. You had a hard time. I don't think anybody is going to have a super easy time all the time. There's always going to be that thing that just makes no sense whatsoever. And the best, and this is a programming thing I'll give as an example that was hilarious to me. I was writing a game for fun. I was using Game Maker, and this is a long time ago.
Nice.
And I was making this game, and I was really happy with it. But when I played it back and I resumed from a save file, I'd end up on a random level. And I spent 2 months trying to troubleshoot this. I sent the code to people. I'm like, what did I do wrong? And nobody could see anything wrong with the code. They're like, yeah, that looks correct. That should work. And months later, I'm like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to run memtest 86 on my PC and test the RAM. And sure enough, the RAM was completely defective. So what was happening was that the code was correct, but it was going through RAM to be compiled.
Oh, no.
And as soon as it goes through RAM, it's corrupted. So I literally made no changes to the code, changed the memory in the computer, recompiled. It was perfect.
That's horrible, though. What I mean, that most people would never be able to find that bug. They would just
it took 2 months.
They'd just cry, right? It would be total failure. I don't understand.
And the only reason why I knew to check for this was because I was always also doing computer repair for people on the side, and I would download various tools to test hardware and things. And I'm like, well, I've had run into bad memory before. Like, it's conceivably possible that something going through defective RAM would come out defective. And sure, that has nothing to do with Linux, but sometimes the problem ends up not being you, but with imposter syndrome of the complexity of it, you immediately think it's you until you prove that it's not. And these are the weird things that people go through to troubleshoot things. But when it comes to Linux, you have all these key players. I mean, it's one thing to say, do I choose Python? Do I choose this? Do I choose that? Do I go the Rust route? But with Linux, it's like, oh, there's different desktop environments. There's different login managers. Even the boot process, there's different bootloaders that you could use to boot your computer, and window managers versus desktop environments. Or do you even run one of those at all? And when it comes down to the distribution, which one is right for my use case out of the 100 or so that are listed on DistroWatch? And it just ends up being very difficult to navigate. And I thought that was one of the most important things about the channel, was to kind of include the overall community so people understand the environment in which Linux lives. And then, 1 million subscribers later, people seem to find value in it. And it's just amazing.
I couldn't have said it better myself. That's, what? I think that's actually a great place to leave it. But first, I have 2 questions.
Okay.
The one is, where would you suggest someone wanting to get started with Linux, diving into your content, because you've got a hell of a lot of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where should they start? Let's say they're in a somewhat, junior to mid-level developer. They know Windows, maybe they've dabbled in WSL, but they're ready to make the leap.
I would say the Linux Crash Course series would be the first stop. Now, the thing is, last I checked, there's over 80 episodes in that series. It's the longest running of the channel's history when it comes to a tutorial series. But the entire thing is designed to where the videos aren't made for you to follow them in any order. And it's made in a way where you could just watch the individual videos that have to do with what you're curious about. And there's going to be a lot of those, depending on what you want to accomplish. You have to know what you want to accomplish. Do you want to get a job in Linux? Do you just want to run it on your local computer? But whatever it is, there's going to be a video in there. If you follow the command line route, there's going to be videos on SED or whatever else I have on there, the package managers. But if you want to run it on your computer, then you're going to see other videos that'll go over what is a desktop environment. So if you want to know what that is. So wherever someone's starting, there's probably a video in there. they'll help you out with that. There's also the playlist as well. Generally speaking, if you're curious about something on my channel, you could probably search for the keyword on the channel and probably find a video. So, I mean, don't approach it like I have to watch all of Jay's content. You don't have time for that.
No,
There's
you
way
do.
too.
You do. You have to take a leave of absence for 3 months, doing nothing but drinking Red Bull and watching all of the content.
It's like trying to watch Doctor Who from the very beginning up to current. I mean, who has time for that? I mean, there's just a lot of videos. There was over 1,000 at one point, but at some point I replace videos with newer ones, or something isn't relevant anymore, so it goes away. But basically, you just think about what you want to know, and instead of watching every single video, watch the ones that have to do with what you want to know. If you want to install Fedora, there's a video for that. Want to install Ubuntu, there's a video for that. If you're curious how to set up unattended upgrades in Debian, maybe you want to build a WordPress server, set up Nextcloud, maybe you're curious about Proxmox, you want to learn containers, you just search for the keyword of what you're interested in, and there's a very good chance that I might already have a video that covers it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd also point out you have a bunch of, well, of course you know this, but Jay has a bunch of dual booting videos. So if you're not ready to dive head first,
Yep.
You can do that. It's and there's I know you have the one on Mint that I watched, and the one on Fedora. I'm sure you have others too. So
yeah, I try to revive those every distribution cycle. Sometimes it's hard when a distribution comes out every 6 months, but when something changes, I like to refresh the Ubuntu dual boot, the Fedora dual boot, and it's interesting because the process often doesn't change, but the graphics change, and
the
people, even if the steps are the same, people see a video that has the old wallpaper from an old release, and oh, that's old, I don't want to watch that one. So sometimes it's just a matter of refreshing it. But generally speaking, if you approach Linux as, what's your goal? You're not going to learn everything. Don't try it. You're going to burn yourself out. But
too much.
Yeah. What do you want to know? What do you want to learn? And you focus on those specific things. And then as you progress, you're going to become curious about more and more things. Like if you're never interested in the sed command, but one day you have a use case for it. I have the 200 text files, and I don't want to make the same change to each of them one by one. There has to be a command I could use to just plow through all those files and do a find and replace. Yeah, there is. You could use the sed command for that, and no one has a use case for something until they do. So you'll probably find yourself going through my videos, and some of them you're not interested in because it doesn't not something you're doing at the moment. But then years later, you're asked by your boss, or you're doing something in your home lab, I need to learn that command. And oh yeah, that video I passed over a few years ago is now relevant to me, so I'm going to watch it. So it's kind of just being where the audience is, wherever they happen to be.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'd also add, if let's say Fedora is not your cup of tea, right? There are tons of Linux distros, tons of desktops environments. Hell, you can do, I don't know if you've seen this, DHH has this, I can never say this right, Omeka. It's a thing you run on top of Ubuntu that basically pre-configures Ubuntu, and there's an Arch version for it as well, with a bunch of fancy GUI stuff. It's meant for developers, so it has a wizard that walks you through. It's like, are you a Rails developer? Are you a Python developer? Do you need C? What?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that explains why I haven't heard of it, because I just went the hard route, and I have my own configuration management solution I've been building since like 2016 that has probably 80,000 files in it at this point.
That's right. I have my batch file on GitHub that is always evolving, as though it was stuck in Chernobyl for a while.
That's the sane way to do it. No, I don't think anybody should spend. I mean, if you work at a company, sure, you probably do want to spend a long time doing a config management solution. But I think for me, it's like I got tired of wiping my computer and reloading it every time I want to do a video on something. So I needed an automated way to, get it back to the way it was, and then that just turned into another obsession. But Ansible's fun. What can I say?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, so the last question, and it can be anything. What is one tool that you can't live without? It does not have to be a techie tool, but it certainly can.
I would say Ansible, because
Ansible, okay.
Yeah, because the thing is, when I'm doing content, it's like I have to be everything. I have to be, all the different things. I mean, if someone's a sysadmin at a company, they're a sysadmin. I'm the sysadmin. I'm the video producer. I write the scripts. I do the filming, and that takes a lot of time. So what I don't have is a lot of time to go to each server one by one and just make sure they're all on the up and up. I got to have, monitoring in place. But more importantly, if I want to make a change to my systems, maybe there's a security vulnerability I need to patch. So I could just put that in Ansible in one place, and then I just get a flood of messages from all of my servers saying that they provisioned, so that way I know that it was done. If I had to do system administration manually, that would very severely impact the channel. And Ansible is just my favorite configuration management solution because it's so adaptable, and you could build it the way you want it, and it could do the things you want it to do the way you want them done. And for me, it was just giving me my time back so I could focus more time on the channel. So that would be a lot of work to do if I had to do all that manually, for sure.
Makes a ton of sense to me. Well, the channel is Learn Linux TV. You can find that at its website, learnlinux.tv. Good work on that .tv top level domain there. Very good. I like it.
Yep.
And of course, the YouTubes. I would strongly suggest, if you're Linux curious, Jay is the guy to follow. He knows his stuff.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you for coming. I hope to talk soon.
No problem. Thanks again.
Thank you. Talk to you later.
Yep. Bye-bye.